All right, so buckle up because today we're diving deep into a document that takes us straight back to 1955.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, a declassified CIA briefing about the Bandung Conference.
Okay.
And it's a wild ride, let me tell you. You've got this whole world on the brink, newly independent nations in Asia and Africa, all coming together trying to figure out, what their place is going to be.
Yeah, finding their own way.
Exactly. It's like throwing off colonial rule was just the first step, right? Now they're figuring out what comes next.
Absolutely.
And this document, it's almost like a cheat sheet, right? It breaks down all the players, all these different countries, into 4 categories: communist, neutralist, anti-communist, and pro-Western.
Wow.
Yeah, you can really see how the U.S. viewed the world during the Cold War,
I bet.
But before we get all tangled up in the labels, can you, set the stage for us? What led to this whole Bandung Conference thing in the first place?
Okay, so picture this. 1955, Cold War is going strong. Everyone's picking sides, U.S. versus the Soviet Union, right? But there's this whole other movement bubbling up. Decolonization.
Right.
Countries across Asia and Africa are breaking free, throwing off those colonial shackles.
Finally.
Exactly. And they're not just content with being free. They want to make their mark on the world stage. Bandung, that was their chance.
It's like a whole new world order, right? Like everything's shifting.
Boom, exactly. And that's what makes this document so juicy. It shows us how the U.S. was trying to wrap its head around all this change. Like, who are these new players? Where do they fit in?
Right.
So they took the 24 countries that were at the conference out of the 25 invited, that is, and tried to sort them right into those 4 boxes.
Okay, so let's unpack those categories. First up, we've got the communist bloc, right?
Right.
China, North Vietnam.
Yep.
And China especially, they were already a major force. Must have made some people in Washington pretty nervous.
Oh, absolutely. China being at the conference, that was a big red flag for the U.S. They saw it as, like a direct challenge to their power in the region.
Yeah, totally. I mean, this is just a few years after the Korean War, right?
Exactly. Tensions were still running super high.
Yeah, then we've got the neutralists at Afghanistan, Burma, India, Indonesia, Nepal, Syria.
Right.
Trying to walk that tightrope between the superpowers.
Yeah, playing it cool. This neutralist bloc, it really shook things up. Like, suddenly it wasn't just about picking sides anymore. These countries were like, no, we're going to do our own thing, thanks.
Yeah. It makes you wonder, though, how unified were they really? Like, were there different flavors of neutrality?
That's a really good point, and it shows the limits of these categories, right? Even within the neutralist bloc, you had countries like India, super vocal about non-alignment, and others, well, they might lean a little closer to one side or the other depending on the issue.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, it was definitely not a one-size-fits-all situation.
Okay, next up, the anti-communist group. Now, this is a real mix. Southeast Asia, the Middle East, Africa, Cambodia, Laos, South Vietnam, Egypt, Gold Coast, Jordan, Libya, Saudi Arabia, Sudan, Yemen.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, and you can really see the U.S. influence here, right? I mean, places like South Vietnam, they were getting a ton of support from the U.S. So it's like this whole global chess game, right?
Absolutely. This wasn't just contained to the U.S. and the Soviet Union. The Cold War was playing out all over the world.
Okay, and last but not least, the pro-Western group: Ceylon, Ethiopia, Iran, Iraq, Japan, Lebanon, Liberia, Pakistan, the Philippines, Thailand, and Turkey. It's interesting, this group includes countries that are so different from each other, their histories, their politics, everything.
Right.
It's kind of wild to see Japan in there, too, like just a decade after World War II.
Right.
What do you think? What did it mean for the U.S. to have all these countries labeled as pro-Western? Like, strategically, does it a big deal?
Oh, huge. Having them seen as, on their side, that was everything for the U.S., building alliances, projecting power, stopping the spread of communism, the whole 9 yards.
Okay, so we got all these countries accounted for, but then there's this one that's just like, nope, not interested. The Central African Federation, they were a British colony at the time.
Oh, yeah.
And it's kind of strange, right? You'd think they'd be all about a conference focused on decolonization.
You would think.
But they skipped it. What's the deal with that?
That is interesting. It kind of suggests that for some colonies, the Cold War stuff, it might have actually been more important than their own independence.
Really?
Yeah, it's possible. Maybe they felt pressured from Britain to avoid the whole thing, like it was too risky, challenging the colonial order and all that.
It's like another layer of this whole puzzle, right? Decolonization, it wasn't always so simple.
Nope, not at all.
Okay, now the document, it also points out the sponsoring countries, the ones who made this whole thing happen. China, Burma, India, Indonesia, and Pakistan. What were they hoping to get out of it?
Well, for countries like India and Indonesia, it was their chance to step up, be leaders of this new world, the newly independent world. And for China, well, it was a perfect opportunity to connect with all these up-and-coming nations, position themselves as the alternative to, the big guys.
Right, yeah. So we've got these 4 categories laid out nice and neat. But let's be real. How accurate were these Cold War labels? I mean, did they really capture all the nuances?
That's the million-dollar question, right? Because on paper it looks simple, but the reality was way more complicated. A lot of these countries, even the ones labeled pro-Western or anti-communist, they were playing their own game. They didn't be boxed in.
Right.
They had their own goals, their own priorities.
And then you throw in this whole idea of non-alignment, and it really messes with the categories, doesn't it?
Big time. Non-alignment, choosing not to side with the U.S. or the Soviet Union, it totally disrupted that whole Cold War binary. These countries wanted the freedom to decide what was best for them, not be told what to do.
Yeah.
Make their own choices.
It makes you realize how tough it must have been for these leaders trying to navigate this whole geopolitical landscape, They're building their own nations while this Cold War tension is just looming over everything.
Absolutely. This document gives us a glimpse into that moment, this pivotal moment in history.
It's a good reminder that things are never as simple as they seem.
Totally agree.
Black and white, right? More like a million shades of gray.
Exactly.
It makes you wonder, though, what if the Bandung conference had never happened? Like, what would the world look like today?
Oh, wow.
It's a big question.
Yeah.
Lots to think about.
Definitely.
All right, well, that's our deep dive for today. Definitely gives us all some food for thought.
It really does.
Until next time.
See ya.